My name is Brandon Laurie, and today I'm here to discuss income inequality. My name is Brandon Laurie, and today I'm here to discuss income inequality. Anyone here know what income inequality is? By definition, income inequality is defined as the uneven income distribution amongst the population. In layman's terms, income inequality is the gap between the have and the have-nots. And this figure has steadily increased since the Great Depression in 1929. Income inequality is measured by using the Gini coefficient. Annually, the U.S. Census Bureau releases its annual report with the U.S. Gini coefficient. This coefficient factors cash income only and does not factor or subtract any taxes. A Gini score of 0 represents total inequality or total equality, where that everyone in the population makes exactly the same amount of money. This is more prevalent in socialist countries. A Gini score of 1 represents total inequality, or other words, one single person in the population has all the income while everyone else has none. In 1968, the Gini coefficient was 0.386, and by 2014, this number has risen to 0.480. To put it down in easier terms, in 1968, 38.6% of all income was owned by 1% of the population, and in 2014, the number risen to 48%. Next, we're going to break down the income of various groups. First, we'll start out with genders, male, female. Gender inequality can be viewed as a structural racism in the fact that on average, women earn just 78 cents on the dollar compared to men, while black women earn just 64 cents and Latino women earn 56 cents on the dollar. We can already see that race is going to factor into this. Between the years of 2000 and 2014, men made on average $4,368 more per year than women, while there are on average almost 11 million more men than women in the workforce. This may be expected. So to better get a better understanding, we're going to break down the income based on the education levels of men and women. From this graph, we can see that just a high school education, men on average make $8,736 per year more than women. With an associate's degree, this number jumps up to just over $11,000 per year. And with a bachelor's degree, this jumps even higher to $16,380 per year. Racial inequality can be viewed as structural racism in the way that white people generally earn more money with less amounts of education. A lot of this is accumulated wealth, which can be tracked back 10 to 15 generations, which coincides with slavery. A surprising number that jumps up from this graph is that on average, Asians make the most money per week and also have less available people in the workforce in the population. However, they're close to what the white population makes. Where you can really see a difference in this graph is the difference on the average white people or Asians make compared to that of black people and Hispanics. From these numbers, we can see the difference between education levels of the different groups. We see that on average, Asian and white people generally make the same amount of money. The real difference comes with black and the Hispanic groups. There's a huge gap between the varying incomes of each education level. Some may argue that there are no benefits to income inequality. That's false, however. One of the benefits of income inequality is that it's a sign of a strong economy. Income inequality promotes innovation by creating new businesses and inventing new products. This allows the less wealthy to move up into the higher income groups. Also, with this inequality, the wealthy are taxed heavier than the rest of the population. This taking from the haves and the have-nots create many of the social welfare programs that we have today. While there are some advantages to income inequality, the disadvantages far outweigh any advantage that there may be. With inequality come a higher level of poverty. The higher level of poverty increases the crime rate in lower communities, and they also cannot afford the police force to deal with the increased crime. People below the poverty line generally are in poor health because they do not have health insurance and do not get the preventative care that they need from their doctors. This in turn causes the health care costs to skyrocket, with insurance companies passing the buck down to those who do have health insurance. This affects the rest of the population. There is also a political instability that comes with income inequality. The wealthy are the ones that can afford to run for office. It creates a potential for a disproportionate political power. This can also encourage an inefficient tax structure because the wealthy will not want to have to pay for those extra taxes. As evidenced by the subprime mortgage crisis in 2008, there is an increase in risky unsecured loans, which creates volatility in the stock market. At every point the Gini index increases, equates to a 10% decrease in high school graduation rates and a 40% decrease in college graduation. As evidenced in the previous slides, the income gap can widen even more dependent on income level or education levels. A Harvard business professor and economist did a survey of 5,000 people on how they thought wealth should be distributed in the United States. As you can see, most people felt that the income should be spread out pretty evenly amongst the group. He then asked them what they think that actually is. Most people believe that the top 20% of people had roughly 50% of the wealth, but in actuality, the bottom 40% had barely any of the wealth, and the top 1% of the people had what was believed to be the top 20%. When we look at this in a different way, with a cross-sectional representation of 100 people, what we ideally think the distribution should be, the wealthy are 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans, but yet the poor are still above that poverty line. However, what we think is occurring is that a portion of the bottom 10% is below the poverty line, while the wealthy are making 100 times more than the poorest and 10 times more than the middle class. However, in all actuality, the poorest Americans don't even register on this graph. With about the bottom 15% of the people below the poverty line, the middle class is barely distinguishable to what we believe the poorest Americans ideally should be at. Even some of the wealth are worse off than what we thought. Only the top 10% of Americans are better off than we believe, and with the top 1% of Americans having 40% of the nation's wealth, while only 7% of the total wealth of the nation is distributed amongst 80% of the people. In 1976, the top 1% of the people took home 9% of all the income. And today, that figure has risen to 24%. In 30 years, that number has almost tripled. To make it even worse, the top 1% own 50% of all stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, while the bottom 50% of all Americans own just 0.5%. This means that half of all Americans are not investing anything and unable to increase their net worth. On average, a CEO makes 380 times more money than his average worker. And this worker will need to work a month in order to make what the CEO will make in one single hour. In conclusion, we don't have to achieve what most of us feel like is ideal. What we just need to wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is. Any questions? Thank you and have a good day.